Welcome to another Excel video. This is going to be a real quick fire video with as many tips and tricks as I can fit into about 20 minutes as possible. So straight into it, we're going to look at a few keyboard shortcuts for basic navigation. The first one is going to be probably the one I use most of any shortcut, and that is Control 1. So what Control 1 does is format cells. So Control 1 takes you to the format cells box, and I'm just going to do something simple like center. Next one I'm going to have a look at is Control Shift 8. What that does, if you like Control asterisk, selects the entire table that you are currently working in. So if my cell is anywhere inside that table, Control Shift 8 and it takes me there. Alright, next one I want to look at is inserting today's date. Control colon does today's date, Control Shift colon does time that we're at right now. Next we're going to go into autofill. Little corner, so extra square at the bottom right hand corner of the selected range. If I pull that down, it continues the sequence as I've started it. So I went 1, 2, 3. It's just continued that sequence. It'll work in any way you like. So if I go up in 4s, it'll go up in 4s. If I type a date, it'll automatically format the next cell as 1 day further in advance. So when you do dates, what happens is this little autofill options box appears, so you can click and expand it, and it gives you some options that tell you what would you like to do: fill days, fill weekdays, fill months, etc. So if I select this option, what it does is it keeps the 23rd but goes to the next month. So very handy. If I wanted to do the first day of the week, what I have to do is the first 2 items in the series and then drag it down. Excel has a whole lot of built-in series, so it knows the days of the week and it'll just continue to do that. Like with the dates that I put in column E, the little autofill helper pops up and I can choose just to fill with weekdays, and what you'll see here is it just cycles Monday to Friday and doesn't do anything else. One of the things that most people don't take advantage of is the fact that you can continue the sequence of quite random strings of data. And if you look here, this is a training diary that I've got, and I've got a spreadsheet where there's about 100 weeks of space for data to be entered. So if I select the entire range that I've worked in plus a blank cell at the bottom, and I drag this corner down, it's going to just copy everything for me, just down until I stop. And what's great is that it auto updates week 1 to week 2. So I'm just going to go down for a few here, but as you can see, it's copied week 2, week 3, week 4, it's kept the spaces, and everything's exactly the same. So it saves me a lot of time and effort to have to copy and paste that further down. The next 3 tricks are quite simple data entry helpers. The first one, most people will know this, that's simply to double click a formula and have it go down. So what we've got here in columns B and C is we've got a target date, which is the 8th of August 2012, and we've got the current date, and we need to figure out the number of days to go. So if I simply go like this, lock that top cell to make sure it doesn't move, it tells me that there's 220 days to go. So I haven't got too many cells, I'm only going down to row 34. But as long as there is data in column B, if I double click here, it will copy the formula down and stop at the last row in the previous column. So if this column went further down, it just knows to keep going because it assumes that it's part of the same table. So the double click down is a very helpful thing as long as your data is standard. So if we had, for example, a deleted space, what we'll find, I'll just redo that formula, is that it stops because it sees a blank space and it thinks the table has ended. So it's important to know that you haven't got blanks in your data series. Next one is a really cool trick that I've seen a couple of times on other people's websites, most notably chandu.org, which is a great place to learn some cool Excel stuff. Filling from above. What we've got here is some example data where I've just put a date and a temperature. So as you can see, all of these first 5 rows are temperatures taken on the 3rd of the 4th. So if I want to manipulate this data, I need to have all of column F filled in. So I'm going to select this range. I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut Control G, and that is the Go To box. And inside that Go To box you can click a button Special and select blanks. And what it's done is it's just selected the blank cells in the larger selection that I had made previously. As you can see, of the blank cells, the one that I started my selection in, cell F5, is the one that's currently selected. I'm going to go up into the formula bar, I'm going to hit equals, and I'm going to click one cell above that. So I'm in cell F5 and I'm typing equals F4. If I hold the control button down and hit enter, what it does is it applies that same logic, i.e. copying the cell directly above into the current cell. So all of the blank cells simply copied what was in the cell above it. So now if I wanted to, I could manipulate this data a bit. One thing to be careful of is this is currently a formula. So a good thing to do if you want to make sure that you can filter and use this column of data in different ways is to convert it to values. So I'm just going to do it a very simple way. Control C, paste special values. So now they're values. I could have done it a couple of other ways. One of them I've only just learned how to do, and I think it's pretty cool. Right click on the margin, drag it away, drag it back, and a little menu pops up that says copy here as values only. I'm going to choose that, and now as you can see, if you scroll up and down, they're values and not formulas. Really neat trick, both of the right click and drag and the copy from above. Really cool tricks and quite useful. Okay, last one in this little group, something that again I just learnt recently, using the name box to select. I frequently create spreadsheets for people that may have 10,000 rows of data and I have to drag a formula down 10,000 rows. What I've got here is much like the first example. I have got the target date, this time it's the 8th of the 8th 2020, and I've got a date 3rd of the 1st 2012. And what I've put here in advance is 2000 all the way down to row 2000. So as you can see, if I use control down arrow, we'll see that down to row 2000 is the 20th of June 2017. So I could simply click and drag all the way down. Because I know this column of data is intact, I could simply double click and it would go down, but I want to show you something else which can be useful if you know your data might have blanks in it. So I'm going to hit Control C to copy. I'm going to go down one cell, and now I'm going to select all the cells between my current cell, which is K6, all the way down to K2000. So I'm going to click up into the name box here. I'm going to type K2000, and just before I hit enter I'm going to hold the shift key down. The shift key has now resulted in everything between K6 and K2000 being selected. So I can just go Control V and it all pastes itself in there. So it's a really neat trick to use if you want to be able to select, particularly if you're working with really large data sets, and paste a formula down. We're going to have a look at a little bit of data validation now. Putting together a basic drop-down box is a pretty simple prospect. You can do it in a lot of ways. The way that I like to do it is using named ranges. So if we look at this example here, we've got two lists that I've created. One is the months of the year. So I'm going to select all the way January to December. I'm going to go up into the name box and I'm going to type months. I'm going to create another one here using this set of names. So I've now got two named lists. I can use that to create drop-down boxes. Select the cells that you want the drop-down box to appear in, click Data, Data Validation, select List, and now we just type the name that we want. So if you can't remember it, hit the F3 button and any names that you've created will appear. So I want months to go there. And as easy as that, I can now go through and type that in. I'm going to do the same thing here for athlete names. Click on Data, Data Validation, List, F3, Names. Alright, so pretty simple stuff. That's traditional data validation, and very useful if you want to limit the way that users can enter data into your spreadsheet. It's not always that simple. Sometimes what you find is that someone spells May incorrectly. You want it to give them an error, because if May isn't spelt correctly, sometimes it can affect formulas that you may have in place. So, very useful to prevent people from doing that. But let's say you've got a new athlete. You've got an athlete named Chris. Now Chris isn't in that list, so unfortunately we can't enter his name. Even if he's a new athlete to the team and we actually want to put some data against his name, we can't. So the type of data validation that we selected can be amended to allow these kinds of things to occur. So I'm going to select these cells again. I'm going to go up to data validation, and we only looked at the first tab in a 3-tab box. The first tab is where the data validation input area is selected, but after that there's some really nice, I guess, usability functions in there. One of them is where you get a little bit of a message, so we can fill that in. Let's just try that. For example, something nice and simple. Let's just have a quick look at that. As you can see, whenever you click on a cell that's got that validation, a little message pops up. That's not what we wanted to look at, but worth looking at anyway. What we really wanted to check out was this third tab called Error Alert. Now, the box that's of interest is this box that's called Style. At the moment it's got a stop on it, which means that when users enter invalid data, stop. Don't let them go ahead. We can change that to either warning or information. So if we just choose warning for now, just type something simple there. Now what happens is if we type Chris in there, it says, are you sure you want to continue? Yes, I do, and it allows me to put that name in. So we've got the best of both worlds, in my opinion. We've got the ability to simply select a name from a list, But if by chance you've got an athlete that isn't on the list, you can type their name in and it will accept it. It'll ask you if you wanted to do that, but it certainly will allow you to go ahead. So I like that. It's quite useful. You can use other tricks to add that name back to the drop down list so that it's available next time, but that's a little bit more complicated, so I won't cover it today. But exploring the different options within data validation, very worthwhile. Next trick I want to have a look at is something that again is quite simple. It's really just about saving time rather than doing anything fancy. What I've got is some very simple data, 3 different strength tests, bench press, squat, bench pull, 3 athletes, and some numbers in there. And so I've created a graph for each of them, a really simple column chart. And on the first one, bench press, what I've done is I've lightened the grid lines, I've made John black, Chris red, Mark blue, I've bolded the axis titles. And why don't I just do one more thing, bold that, and just format this chart title. Cool. Alright, so I've just made a few little formatting changes regardless of what they are. What I can do, rather than have to repeat them all for both these 2 other graphs, I can simply go copy, click on the second graph, paste special, formats. And it applies all of the different formats from the first graph to the second graph. And rather than having to work my way through all the different formatting changes 3 times, I was simply able to paste them across. So that works really well if you've got the same type of graph repeated a number of times. Next trick is quite useful in my circumstance because I prepare things for people all the time, and a year later they ask me to do some work on it and I can't remember how I did something or what I did, and it takes me ages to try and work my way through formulas to figure it out. So I'm getting better at this by using a bit of annotation inside formulas, and so I'm going to show you a couple of options. One, quite an easy one that you probably already know. Second one that you probably don't know. So firstly I'm just going to do a couple of formulas to find the average appearances for these players. And this one here I'm going to do average if my criteria is that they've played more than 100 matches. So finding out the average number of caps of all players who have played more than 100 games. So that's great, not too complicated, but as an example it's not a bad one to use. So the first thing I can do is insert comment. So I could write a big comment in here about why I did the formula this way, or what it was a stepping stone towards, or something like that. The downside with this is that that red little marker there is available for everyone, and there are some settings you can go into that turn those things off, but they can be quite useful to leave active. So doing that is great, really helpful, and can be quite useful in terms of instructing people how to use your spreadsheets without filling a page full of instructions. But in this case this is really a comment for myself, so putting this type of comment in there sometimes isn't great for me. So I'm just going to remove that comment. And what I'm going to do something else is at the end of the formula I'm going to type plus capital N open brackets, and I've just pasted this in here. So inside quotes, inside brackets, after a plus N, I've typed a message to myself. So now if I hit enter, the formula is unaffected. There's no indication without clicking on the cell and looking at the formula that there's anything in there. But it gives me a little message, not too big, but it says that I wanted to know the average caps of players who had played more than 100 matches. So, neat little way to annotate a formula. If you think that you're never going to remember why you did something a certain way, you can put that in there. This trick is about moving around a range or a table of data quickly. Sometimes you've got a very big table. It may have 100 columns and 500 rows, so moving around it from corner to corner or place to place may be quite helpful, especially if you are checking a formula that's at the bottom whilst looking at some information that's at the top of a range. So here I've just got an example. It's a pretty small range. I've got the months of the year and 3 columns of data next to it. At the moment I'm in the top left corner of the grid of data, and if I double click on the bottom margin of the selected cell, it takes me to the bottom value, or the last value in my table. If I click on the right margin of the selected cell, it takes me to the right side, up. So as you can see, quite a neat little way to be able to enter around. And one thing to note here, if I go in column F, there's an extra value. Above January there's one extra cell in this column because it's a column heading, so it takes me to there. So really all it's doing is going up until it bumps into what it can see as the last value.